días, amigos y amigas de Breaking News. Vengan, que estamos en un episodio más, un capítulo más. Que tal, la que Ramos Nuevo, que estoy con Enrique Fernández, Arturo Ferrer. Y hoy estamos, Arturo, ¿cómo estamos hoy?
Hoy estamos en vivo. En vivo.
Hoy estamos en vivo, hoy estamos live. Y el episodio de hoy le pusimos de nombre Having a Beer with Garrett Oliver. ¿Quién es Garrett Oliver? Es el maestro cervecero de Brooklyn Brewery. Además de eso, él es el escritor del Brewmaster Table. Este librito que estoy aquí. Además de eso, además de eso, es el editor del Oxford de la cerveza también. Garrett, how you doing? Welcome to Breaking News. Beer and coffee. How you doing?
Gracias. And all I have to say is, hello!
It's good.
Whoa!
Puerto Rico!
Yeah!
This feels like somebody just scored a goal in the best ever soccer match. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here with us, Garrett.
Good to be here.
It's an honor to have you on the show.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of people saying hello here. Before we begin, I wanna show this, like Jorge was showing. This is one of the best beer books that you can find out there. I borrowed this copy from a very special friend who happened to record a little clip for us. I think you know this gentleman, Garrett. So let's go ahead and run that clip first so we can get started.
Dale, señor director.
Hey, Garrett. Surprised to see me here when I just retired. Knowing that Steve Hindy retired, I want to know your next move. Book, beer, future. Welcome. Breaking News, Puerto Rico.
All right. Rick's done well for himself. He got out of the cold and dark. You know, and, the warmth and the light. Good for him.
Yeah.
Definitely. So Rick's a very special friend for us. You know, he's been in back in Puerto Rico for like a month now, I think. Mm-hmm. He's very fond of you. He always talks fantastic things about Mr. Oliver whenever I'm around him. So he's a big fan, and he was excited as soon as he heard we were gonna do the show with you. He was excited.
Much appreciated. So what are you guys drinking? You don't have any beers.
We
were just gonna get the let's go for the first. Definitely.
Awesome, thank you.
Woohoo!
Well,
so we're obviously gonna have something from.
For me, see, like being in a brewery sometimes is like being in a band, and so when you're in a band, you don't wear your own band's T-shirt. It's a thing. Like you don't do it. Like you can't be seen doing that. So for our broadcast today, I'm drinking something from a friend. So this is Russian River's porter, which is not very often seen. So Vinny's a good pal. I know he's been on here. He sends me some beers, and so I haven't tried this yet. So I'm going to try it with you.
Oh, nice.
That's anything from Russian Rivers.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. Yeah,
top notch. And that looks fantastic. I didn't even know they canned that, so that's awesome. That's probably not everybody can get their hands on that.
I think I only had it once or twice before, and I was with Vinny when I had it. So
awesome. So Garrett, let's get right into like you went from studying film, you went from being a band manager, rock and roll band manager in London.
Yeah.
You got into beer. Like how did that all go down? How does your story with beer begin?
Well, when I was in college, like everybody, I drank beer, or what I thought was beer, which was a thin, fizzy liquid that we didn't really like very much, but we drank it. It was there. We drank everything that we could find because we were college students, and we didn't have any money. So, I'll tell you the actual truth. We drank Budweiser when we had money. We almost never had any money. But if we had if we had money, we drank Bud because Bud tasted kind of like water, and we thought like that wasn't bad compared to the other stuff, which tasted terrible. I mean, really bad. So you come to realize from the old days that there is a reason why Anheuser-Busch, became huge, and their quality was better within that framework, than many of the other beers that they, have gone by the wayside. So I was doing that. I was also stage managing rock bands in college. I like to tell the younger brewers that I am 400 years old. And so I took the Ramones bowling once.
Nice.
Wow.
Yes. I put on a concert in 1983 with REM as the opening band for the English Beat. Now, some of you are not.
Yeah, English beat.
Yeah, some of you are not old enough to remember even REM. Never mind the English Beat. But
There's a Titans guy, right?
and then when I moved to London, I was going to do some film work for HBO, which never happened. I ended up running a concert hall, put on some great bands, Cocteau Twins, Billy Bragg, a lot of great people. But at the same time, my friends were taking me to the pub. And at the pub, I discovered this stuff called beer, or real ale, as they called it, cask beer. And it just completely blew my mind. We didn't have anything in the United States that was anything like this. All the beers that I had seen before, except for maybe Guinness, were one color, one type, not very much flavor. And these were different from brewery to brewery. They had all kinds of complexity of flavor going on. And I fell in love with this stuff. And even among my friends, I became quickly enamored enough that I was considered an expert by my friends who lived there. So, because I was very dedicated. And so I started traveling because I was a European resident at the time. I had access to some places that Americans couldn't normally go, like the communist countries back then, like Czechoslovakia and Hungary. But I also went to Germany. I went to Belgium. I went all over Europe and discovered all these different types of beers that, we simply hadn't been told about. I mean, we're talking about before any of us, had seen Michael Jackson's books or, any of this other stuff. We didn't even know that these beers existed. Nobody had mentioned IPA. Nobody, there was no internet. So it was a very different time. And then I came back to the United States and I went to the bar and they said, Bud Light, Miller Lite, Coors Light, and Heineken. And I was like, oh no.
No thanks.
So I started making beer at home so I could have some beer. I was not actually interested in making the beer. I fell in love with making the beer from doing it. And I helped start the New York City Home Brewers Guild, which is still going as a home brewing club, in the mid 80s. And in 1989, I went to work for a place called Manhattan Brewing Company, which had been started by the guy who had been the lead brewer for Samuel Smith's in England. So I was his apprentice for 4 years.
Wow.
Before I became brewmaster. He moved to California. He liked to sail boats, which was good for me because I got the job.
Nice.
So basically, you learned the commercial side from the guy that was running Samuel Smith. So you had a very good teacher then.
Yeah,
I
Samuel
did.
Smith.
And there are still things that if you look at some of our brewing records and things like that, there are still things that we use, words that we use that are like old English words that most people would never have heard, like guile, which is a word for a fermentation, and we'll have guile numbers and things like that. And these are things passed down, basically out of the Middle Ages into the breweries in England, and then passed down to us through Samuel Smith, through this particular line.
Awesome. So you were brought up sort of in the world very attached to the English side of the traditional beer brewing. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, in those days, really, people looked at the world of beer when they thought about it at all. They looked at it. The British came first, and we in the United States, started off anyway, obviously, with a British background when it comes to to beer to that extent. And so, for example, if you look at Charlie Papazian's first book, I'm sure it's changed. I'm sure he's updated it, but there's no Belgian styles or anything in that book, right? There's like there were lagers, and then there were British ales. There was no mention of Belgium. There weren't even any Belgian categories at the Great American Beer Festival, until I don't know, like the mid '90s.
Wow.
Yeah. And a lot of them were piled into one category. So, really, people tend to start in the home brewing. They tend to start with British ales, or at least they used to start there, because they were, in some ways the easiest to carry off. You couldn't really do Belgians anyway. There were no Belgian yeast strains available in those days. And then the more difficult thing, of course, was to do lagers, where you needed temperature control. So not that many homebrewers had temperature control back then. So, you saw the scene dominated by ales, and that's how you saw American craft brewing start as well.
Garrett, I have a question for you. When someone say to you, brewmaster, how does that mean to you? What are the responsibilities of a brewmaster?
Brewmaster is a title, to me, that is very similar to the title of chef in a restaurant. So, whatever, you have all kinds of restaurants, and whatever it means in that particular place, that you are the one who is ultimately responsible for the food. You are the one who is doing the recipes. You are probably the one who is hiring all the other cooks. You are the one who's responsible to make sure the kitchen is clean. I mean, everything. So everything about the beer from start to finish until your glass is empty, is the responsibility of the brewmaster. And then basically, chef is the closest analogy that I can think of, the closest thing.
Nice.
Is that something for you that you think people like earn the title, or is it like the difference between a head brewer and a brewmaster? Like, do you automatically, as soon as you're a head brewer, are you the brewmaster, or do you think it entails a little bit more of like, respect sort of in the industry?
It's a funny thing, and it's very much based on the differences of language, even between England and the United States. So the title, the job title, that is head brewer in England is brewmaster in the United States.
Wow.
And in neither place is master brewer the same as brewmaster. Very few people would dare call themselves master brewer, but brewmaster is a job title. So if you run a restaurant, then and you run the kitchen, you're chef. At least in the United States, you're the chef. But even if it's like a very modest family restaurant, you're still the chef. But you don't call yourself master chef. That's like you took an exam or something. Somebody gave you a big medal around your neck or something like that. Generally, people will reserve the term master brewer for people who have passed certain exams, international exams. Now, in Germany, Breumeister is a title which is conferred by a certain level of education. And so it's not just a job title, it's actually like if you become a lawyer, whatever it is that comes after your name, or being called doctor, it's a very specific thing that is a qualification. And then, you are still a brewmaster even if you are not working in a brewery. It's like a title.
Okay.
So just the switch of two words.
Yeah, so I use the word brewmaster, but as a job title, and I hope that by the time I retire, I could call myself master brewer.
and I think it's the coolest sounding job title in the world, personally.
I think it's funny. I used to always say that it was the third coolest job title, in the United States, if you were a guy at least. The first one was astronaut. Number 2 was quarterback. And then like number 3 was brewmaster. Though I did one time go to a party, and you know they always say you know that you love your job if you enjoy people asking you what you do and you like answering the questions. And so, you know, people would come to me at a party and it's like, so what do you do? I'm like, brewmaster, you know. And I remember being at a party one time and, you know, a guy asked me, what do I do? And I'm like, brewmaster. And I said, so what do you do? And he said, I'm a fighter pilot. I was like, whoa. So I had to think about whether brewmaster was number 3 or number 4 on the list, you know, of great job titles, but it's pretty good.
Nice. When do you decide to write this beauty?
It was in 2001. I started. I was doing a lot of beer dinners and beer tastings, etc. We were starting to see a real, you know, amazing flowering of craft brewing and also imported beers being available. We had so much amazing stuff, and I was getting a chance to drink these beers with all kinds of beautiful food and traveling a lot. And I saw all the combinations you could make, and then I would see people talking about beer, and it was just like, they never put the two things together. I mean, sometimes people had beer with food, but you know, I was kind of discovering for myself that beer and food was something where 2 plus 2 did not equal 4. It might equal 7 or 9, depending on what you did. And so the idea of the book, you know, was that yes, you will learn about beer, but also if you read this book from start to finish, you know, you will start from possibly knowing nothing. By the end, you'll know a lot. And if you pay a little bit of attention to what you're eating and drinking, your life will be slightly better every day. You know, that's kind of the idea. Not that much better, but slightly better every day. And there are not many things that you can do that will make your life slightly better every day. And so, you know, that was what I wanted to do. And I wanted to find a way of talking about beer that was different than what other people had done. Because if you're talking about, you know, Michael Jackson's books, I mean, they're spectacular books. There's no way you were going to write about beer better than Michael Jackson. So, you know, if that's what you want to do, you're not really necessarily going to make a great contribution. I was hoping to do something different. And I'm glad to see that the book is still in print after so many years.
Nice.
I think it's selling even more now.
Yeah, sí.
It is.
When it came out,
Yeah.
which is, you know, a testament to how many people are getting into this wonderful industry.
Yeah, well, getting into the industry and things like the Cicerone program, you know, that are, you know, using the book to help teach people. And it's interesting because when I wrote it, I certainly looked to write it in a style and also with beers and breweries that I thought would last the test of time. I mean, so to that extent, it was designed that way. You didn't see many breweries that were really new in the book because I didn't want 5-10 years later for the book to be completely out of date. And so, you know, that part, you know, was done purposely and also helped us cement, you know, the idea behind the styles so that people could understand them.
Nice. We have a video for another friend from ours. So, señor director, el segundo video. Dale, play.
Hey Garrett, Nico, aka Harnico. I'm a big fan of yours. I really love the Brewmaster's table. It has been a big help because I make pairing videos and they have guided me through so many of my videos. I had 2 questions to ask you. I wanted to know first, what's your favorite beer pairing? And what is the one beer that's the to-go beer that can pair with almost any dish? thank you for letting me ask you a question. And cheers to you guys from Breaking News. And Garrett, have a good night.
Thank you, Nico. Gracias, Nico.
Well,
Desde Chile,
Yeah.
from
thank
Chile.
you. Well, I
Yeah,
think
just from-
anybody who, I don't have one favorite beer pairing. There are ones that stick in my mind, that I've had. I remember one time, being in Amsterdam, on the canal called Single, and having a wit beer with a salmon dish that really just completely blew my mind. There are so many I've done over 1,000 beer dinners, and so, over the last 30 plus years. And so there are things that step out as surprising that I never would have seen coming. A place in Norway where, where we served a creek together, again, with a salmon dish, which to me sounded very strange and impossible. And in one of the few situations where I let the chef actually make the pairing, because normally, I keep the pairing part for myself and chef decides on the menu. And this is one that he talked me into, and I was just very surprised. So I tend to really remember the ones that do something really different than I expected. But even things like, Imperial Stout and Stilton cheese, which I wasn't expecting and happened by accident. And to this day, I had, people here for dinner on Saturday, first one in a year, and so we served 2013 black chocolate stout with some really good Stilton, and still just a magnificent pairing. For one beer that can pair with almost any dish, I think that anybody who read Brewmaster's Table will know of my love for Saison Dupont.
Yeah.
And Saison Dupont is certainly, talk about a beer that has launched 1,000 beers. Because, when I was writing about Saison Dupont, there were almost no Saisons produced in the United States. And now, of course, there are so many. So
Now
I
we
think
have a
every
few.
brewery have one. I think every brewery in the United States, they have a Saison kind of.
Yeah, it's sort of
Yeah.
a staple now
Yeah.
of one of the basic styles.
Mhm.
Garrett, you talk about this in your book, but in your thought, the wine versus beer thing for pairing, what would be your argument for somebody who to explain, why beer could be even better than wine to pair with food in any setting, including, 5-star restaurants and
well, I've worked with a lot of the top restaurants in the world, which is a great privilege and an honor for me, and also fun. What I would tell them is that it's actually not that hard to understand when you really think about it. I've done a lot of beer versus wine with cheese, beer versus wine with food dishes. Often these are charity events, and I will be up against, thank you, Nick. That will be up against a sommelier, and we'll have a competition. And there are two kinds of sommeliers: the ones who know they're going to lose, and the ones that don't know they're going to lose. But they all lose. Now, I would love to say that they lose because I'm a genius, but you have to think about it. Like, they have basically one, if you think of a competition, they have one weapon. They have one ingredient, which is a grape. Really nice ingredient, that grape. You can do a number of different things with it. I, however, have everything. Okay? I have everything. My beer can look and taste like this. It can taste like chocolate. It could be acidic. It can be bitter. It can be hoppy. I can make it hot with ginger. I can make it hot with chilies. I can put fruit in it. I can do, you cannot possibly win, because the competition is rigged. I go like this, and inside my coat, I have all these different things, and the other guy's got basically one thing. And so, I love wine. I would say I know a lot about wine. I am the guy in the restaurant that usually my friends will hand the wine list to, at least one of them. I know my way around. I can talk about it for a long time, and I'm really interested in it. However, wine is really limited. And to most people, I know that this sounds like a terrible thing to say, and people will be very angry, some people, but to most people, red wine tastes like red wine, and white wine tastes like white wine. You know, now
It is what it is.
Yeah.
yes, and if you sit down with them and say, well, this Viognier doesn't really taste very much like this Chardonnay, and this Chenin Blanc is really different than this Riesling. Sure, yes, you can tease it out, and I can talk to you about the differences between all these grapes. But this is not the same as talking about like Weiss beer versus IPA versus Saison versus Porter versus Lambic, barley wine, barrel aged imperial. I mean, you can't possibly win, because beer is a culinary thing. Wine isn't. It's culinary in a way, but when it's done in the traditional way, it is partly agricultural. And the way that I would explain it maybe best is to think of it this way. The nearest analog to the brewer is not the winemaker, but the chef. I have the idea first, right? The beer is created in your mind, and then from your mind, you draw the ingredients and things that you need to create the flavor that you want. This is what a chef does. This is not what a winemaker does, unless they are one of these modern winemakers, who has been taught to alter wines, through various means by, chemistry, etc. What you're supposed to do traditionally is express the grape and the land and the terroir and everything else. This is the opposite of what brewing is. So, brewing is mentally really different. I think that in both cases, brewers have moved back towards some ideas of trying to allow more nature back into their beers. And you see the same thing happening in the wine world. And you see these worlds kind of coming together, and we've made some beers that blend them.
One of the funniest things I found in the book, at the beginning of the book, where you mentioned the wine and beer thing, is when you mentioned that a lot of people that do wine pairings, they start out saying, "Oh, there's a lot of tricky ingredients to pair with wine," and when you look at the list, it's like everything is tricky to pair with wine. There's like a lot of basic food items there, like eggs, cheeses, garlic. Oh, it's tricky to pair with wine. So what you're saying is it makes complete sense. That it's kind of unfair to compare the two when it comes to the food pairings.
Yeah, we have so much more to work with. I mean, if you think about the either end of the beer spectrum and the wine spectrum, you take a big 16% California Cabernet, kind of 80s and 90s style, and go to whatever you like, Vino Verde, Albarino, something like super light, refreshing, and acidic. That's like this. And then you look at the beer world, and it's just, it's like eight times wider, the flavor range. So there's just a lot more to work with. But that is why, from a culinary point of view, it just, knowing about beer is like knowing more about music. Like, say you never heard like, modern African music, from the 60s to the present, and then you play somebody, Fela Kuti for the first time.
Yeah.
and suddenly they're like, oh my God, like there's a whole other world that opens up. Or you play them Coltrane for the first time, and they discover something about great jazz, or they never heard Louis Armstrong. When you introduce somebody to a whole other realm of music, maybe they used to listen to only classical music. Maybe they just liked rock and roll. Maybe they were punk rockers, but they suddenly discovered this other thing and then your life is better. Period. You know, that's kind of like what we are trying to do for people, is give them some information that's going to show them something new to like. And something new to like is just a great thing to have.
Yep.
Definitely.
Arturo.
Bueno, ya la contestó.
What do you think is the, like, if there's is there any secret to creating a good pairing with beer and food, or is it just, you know, creating a balance? If you could pinpoint it to one thing, what would you say is always works?
Well, I mean, there are some things that are going to step out to you and become, you know, somewhat obvious. I mean, there is obviously the balance between the impact or weight of the food and the beer. If you have, you know, a really light, delicate dish and you have like a huge beer that's just going to overwhelm it, it's going to be pretty obvious to you that's not going to be the greatest pairing. You know, some things are just not, you know, not likely to work. So if you say I have delicate, flaky fish, this porter is awesome. It's going to be great with the steak. It's going to be great with, Mexican mole negro. It's going to be great with a number of things. Probably with a light, flaky fish, not so great. You know, it doesn't sound good. Though, of course, there are surprises. Oysters, classic, you know, and would be great here, you know, partially because of that, you know, extreme, you know, brininess that works. So I think that there's usually one of the things that beer does very well is provides something of what I call a flavor hook, which is a part of the beer's flavor that somehow echoes something in the food. So when something is fried, it's browned, it's caramelized, it's roasted, it's grilled over a fire, you develop caramelization, and that caramelization is then going to latch onto similar flavors in a beer, whether it's Brooklyn Lager that has, you know, crystal and caramel malts, or whether it's something like this that also contains a bit more roast. Those two things on your palate kind of latch onto each other. Wine tends to be better at doing contrast than harmony, because there aren't that many flavors in a lot of the food that you're eating that are really in harmony with the wine. When you eat fish, you're not saying, wow, there's an echo of flavor, you know, from the fish that's also in the wine. Probably not. Sometimes there is. Sometimes there is. I mean, you know, Chablis can have, this kind of seashell quality to it, sea air quality. So, you know, there are things, but not as obvious as, okay, I have mole negro and it has some chocolate in it and then you come with these similar flavors that are diving into each other. Or this might match to the char, you know, on a piece of meat, or the way it might tie to smoky flavors in barbecue. So it's just going to be, you know, really different.
When you go to make a pairing, do you think of a specific quality of the beer first, like the aroma, the bitterness in it, the yeast profile, or is it just like you think of the overall flavor of the finished product?
I think of the flavors, you know, together and how they're going to play across my palate. And really, you know, when people ask me to describe how do you put these things together, that's probably the toughest thing for me to describe, because I think probably it's like asking somebody what goes through their mind when they're composing a piece of music. When someone can like hear the music in their head, that's kind of like what I'm doing. I'm like tasting it in my head and seeing whether I can see these things working together. But I mean, there are things that I like to do these days. You know, I like to take a few more chances with beer pairings, you know, than I used to. It used to be I always wanted to, you know, hit some kind of perfect home run with every pairing. But after a while, you know, you start to play it safe. And so when it comes to these things, what I tell people is like, I have news for you. Every beer is good with every sausage. Okay? Like, you know, this is not every beer is good with every sausage. This is not going to be a revelation to anybody. You do not need to serve in your beer tasting beer and sausages. Yes, it's going to work, but you're not. But no one's going to learn anything. And so, I prefer to see beer pairings that are a bit more subtle and have a bit more thought to them. I mean, you can certainly start with beer and sausages, and there's no reason not to have that. But that's not the kind of pairing that I tend to want to show off while I'm going to go do, a tasting or a dinner for people.
You'd rather challenge the person to sort of think of what they're actually having in the taste and all that, instead of just
I
it is going to taste fantastic. But
I like people to be surprised. I mean, that's one of the fun things is really giving people a surprise where they say to themselves, I never thought beer could do that, or I never thought these two things were going to work together. And that's really part of the really fun part. Things, it's not just a matter of deliciousness, it's a matter of, can people understand what happened here and take it home with them and maybe use it at home, in their own setting. When they have people over for dinner, will they think, hey, wait until you check this pairing out?
We have a question for our friend Mouse. Here's you can read it.
What is the worst pairing I've experienced? Oh man. That's a good question. I'm not sure. Certainly there have been situations, and here you'll see the way I work this. I'm going to blame it on the chef. Sometimes some chefs don't tell you everything. Sometimes. I mean, almost never have I actually tasted the dish before I show up, right? Often we'll be in another country. They'll describe it to me, etc. But the last minute, chefs are creative people. They're like, you know what? I'm going to throw some chilies in there. And they may not have told me, that they were going to do that.
Surprise.
And then it might throw off my whole idea. Suppose I come with some kind of delicate sour, and you didn't tell me the dish was going to be spicy. It's like, yeah, I decided to make it spicy, and then when I throw your whole thing off. Certainly, I'll have to think harder about that. There have certainly been some things where I took, a chance and it didn't work. But I think one of the things that is nice is that people will take that ride with you. I will tell people when I'm worried about a pairing, I'll tell people in advance that I'm like, I've been thinking about this one and I'm not sure it's going to work. Let's see what happens. And take them on the journey with you, because it's not a calculation in a computer. It's kind of seeing what's going to happen, and you go do this with a chef, and it's like getting a bunch of musicians together and they start jamming. Maybe the mood's going to be there, maybe the whole thing is going to work, and maybe it won't. But it'll be interesting in the way that it doesn't work, possibly.
Is there a group of food, culturally speaking, Mexican, Indian food, Thai, Chinese? Is there a group of food that you would say has the greatest possibilities to pair with beer? Specifically, if you had to pick your favorite type of the do pairings, or is it all over the place?
Yeah, I mean, it's really so all over the place. I mean, even at home, I cook, within the Mexican tradition, the Thai tradition, the French tradition, I've certainly, and within each of these, of course, as Americans, we often talk about Mexican food. There's no Mexican food. There's no Italian food. Italians never heard of Italian food. The food in Italy is super regional and very different from one place to another. Same in Mexico. Same in a lot of countries. So you will see these regional differences, that are really strong. So, I do think that there are areas where you're starting to see, with the rise of sour beers, you're starting to see pairings of sorts that you wouldn't have seen, even 10 years ago. So with some Thai dishes, for example, that might have notable acidity in them, or in other cultures, ceviches that from a different direction might have a lot of acidity, and you're playing in with sour beers. It's just more and more exciting. And there's also cuisines that we didn't really used to know in the United States that are becoming more and more common. We might have known certain types of Thai food, but then you have the regional Thai cuisines like Northern Thai, Isan cuisine, which is like really different. You might see, instead of Hunan food or food from other parts of China, you might see a lot more Szechuan cooking, and that kind of spice, which is tricky to work with, because it's not just fiery, but it has that slightly tongue numbing effect. But again, Saison, yeah, it worked really well. Just works.
We have a question from a viewer here that sort of ties into this to this conversation from Kristen. I don't know if we can get it on the screen here.
Okay.
Which country's beer do you like the most and why? Oh
my God.
That's very I mean, I would say that, it is like asking, what is your favorite kind of music? Like, I don't have a favorite kind of music. You will ask me that question, you'll get a different answer every day. I mean, a great, I can remember specific pints of English bitter that I had 25 years ago. I can remember them like I had it, like I drank it yesterday.
Wow.
But the same is true of some great beers from Belgium. The same is true of, particularly Helles beers from Germany. Great simple lager done, at its very best in Germany is ludicrously spectacular. I mean, it's absolutely wonderful. And there are so many people who think that oh, that's boring. It's like, yeah, you haven't had the real one.
I know what you.
when you have that, it just blows your head clean off. And there's only 3-4 ingredients. There's one hop, there's one malt, there's one yeast strain, and a great Pilsner or a great Helles is one of those things. It's like a Western or a James Bond movie. There's only 2 or 3 plots. You know what's going to happen. There's not, there's no
I agree.
difference. But the question is, like with a James Bond movie or a Western, can you do it with style? The question isn't what's going to happen. The guy's going to kill the bad guy who came to town, who's menacing the people, whatever else. Yeah, and then he's going to ride out of town. We all understand that. But the question is, can you do it with style? And that's kind of, the Pilsner and Helles thing. I'll tell you this, when I talk to brewers everywhere in the world who make, even ones who make really funky beers, etc., when I ask them, what is the thing that you really would love to get great at? What is the thing that you would really love to brew that maybe you never brewed? And they all say Pilsner.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's difficult to make a real good. It's simple.
Yeah.
It's simplicity, but it's difficult also.
Yeah, it's the same thing comes to my head. It's like a sushi. Like, to be a master of sushi, it's so simple, but you have to be a master to get a great sushi.
Absolutely, it's true. And I think in the same way, in your mind, if you know serious sushi, and serious Pilsner, it's almost like you have to separate it in your mind between that and everything else. There's what I call Tuesday night sushi, which is the sushi you get from the place 2 blocks away, and it costs $20, and it's fine. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It tastes good. Perfectly okay sushi. And then there's sushi. Real master,
real deal.
The real thing, yeah.
And for that sushi, you will pay large sums of money, and you will feel like you are floating on a cloud after you've had it, and that like your life has improved and everything is better. And that is like a whole different mindset. It's a whole thing. They both look like sushi, but they're completely different.
The difference, yeah. And mastering is a journey. Mastering those stuff.
You got Bel Air. Awesome.
I will open the second.
Go for the second one.
Nice. I'm really happy about. Well, I mean, obviously, it's my beer, so it's easy for me to say. I love Bel Air. But I mean, before we brought out Bel Air, we were making other sour beers. But around the brewery, we just called Bel Air. We called it Happy Juice, because like whenever we drank it, we just kind of smiled. We felt good. Like it just tasted really nice to us, and it's one of the few differences, really big differences in the beer world, if you like, that's happened since Brewmaster's Table, is there were not that many. There were very few Berliner Weiss. Almost nobody had heard of Goza back at that time in 2003, and there were not many American sours. There were a few, but that was not like a big thing, 15, 20 years ago. And so, the rise of the American sour has really, helped bring sour beers like around the world. So now you're seeing, everywhere from Brazil to Japan, brewing sour beers, really more through the American, idea than through the originals, of Belgium and Germany. And in the American sour, we kind of took some of the Belgian ideas and some of the German ideas and kind of mashed them up together, to make a range of kind of American sours. And now you see people going and doing their own things, like Brazil. They're going nuts down there. They have all these fruit that we in the United States don't even know about because we're ignorant about fruit. You go to the supermarket, and probably might be the same in Puerto Rico. Like the amount, the number of varieties of fruit that we have in a market here are like a quarter or 20% of what you see in a market in Sao Paulo.
Right.
What foods do you recommend with this beer?
Well, I mean, we've already done a few variations, and the latest one, is with key lime. So we have key lime Bel Air. There's also raspberry Bel Air.
Nice.
So that's been out. We made we used the base for Bel Air to make other beers. There's one out now called Palenque, and Palenque is aged in mezcal barrels.
Wow.
Also has key lime. So it's actually like strong key lime goza, like if you like, aged in mezcal barrels. That's re-fermented in the bottle. We had Kiwi's Playhouse, which was had kiwi fruit. So there have been quite a few over the years. But the thing that really I think makes Bel Air special is it gives you a nice sour beer that you can drink like at a barbecue every day. And I think that it also, for me anyway, sticks to what I call the 4-pint principle. And the 4-pint principle is very simple. For our regular beers, not something that's 10% or something like that, but for more regular beers that you can buy fairly regularly, I want you to want 4 pints. And if you don't want 4 pints, if you can't imagine drinking 4 pints, then my feeling is that beer might have a problem. And I can tell you, like Bel Air, once I started drinking Bel Air in the days when we went out, I'd go out to a bar. If I started drinking Bel Air, I was going to have Bel Air all night.
All night.
Nice.
All night, 4 in a row, no problem. And that's the thing. It's one thing to have like one beer, but to have 4 in a row and it still tastes great on the 4th one, that's the thing.
Nice.
You know, can you make it? Can you make it like that?
Garrett, when you're making or thinking about a new recipe of a new beer, do you think about the pairing of the for food, or you're thinking about, I have this idea, I want to create these flavors, or how do you make a new recipe?
There's a number of things that come into consideration. I mean, I would like the beer to be separate from our other beers. I don't want to make any beers that taste almost like another beer that we already made. To copy yourself or to copy somebody else, that doesn't really interest me very much. So I want some distance. I would also like the beer to be able to do things that the beers that we currently have don't do or can't do as well. And part of that is also that difference. If we have 3 beers that can match all these dishes and that I would drink in the same situation, then why do I need this new one if it's not that different? And I think of it kind of this way. If I'm going out and say I want to buy some clothes, I want a new jacket, and I see a jacket, like, that's a nice jacket, I might buy that jacket. The thing that I think about is, when will I wear that jacket instead of the other jackets I already have? If the answer is never, because I have better jackets than this for every situation, then I'm not buying that one. You know, yeah, because you'll never end up wearing it, right? Like, if there's always something that's going to be better in your closet already, why get another one?
Don't even bother.
And I think the same thing about beers. It's like a thing that you have. If you're always going to choose something else from the Brooklyn line of beers, then this beer is not necessary. You know, you want it to do something else. I also like to learn things. I mean, stuff that I don't know, you know, and can't easily do, that I have to think my way through. Mm-hmm. And by the way, before we, I know we don't have, that much time left, but, you know, for those who look in the background of, of Zoom calls and whatever else for what we call the Easter eggs, I want to know, Hop Solo, whether you know this.
Is that a handle?
Wow.
It's a lightsaber.
This is the real thing.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, this is a 1950s Graflex splash gun, which is what they used for Luke's lightsaber in Star Wars. They didn't even change it. They just put some grips on it, and like this is the actual object. So
that's
wow.
Awesome. So yeah,
that's a collector's item.
You need to pay more attention now. You can't leave these things.
That's a homebrew. That's one of the homebrews he made a couple of years back, and he made that logo, and it was pretty cool.
Garrett, I don't know if you know what is a mofongo is. A mofongo?
I've heard of mofongo, but I've never had it.
So a mofongo is a Puerto Rican dish that is made with plantain, have a little of olive oil, garlic, some spices, and we also add like some carne frita, fried pork.
Yeah.
What beer?
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's really good.
It's really good.
If you can, what beer do you recommend to pair with a mofongo?
Well, here's a question: like, is it spicy or not spicy?
Not
No,
spicy.
it's not spicy. No.
Not spicy.
It's
very
really
garlicky.
seasoning.
Yeah, it's very garlicky.
Yeah, it's usually not spicy. And they have it with, like Jorge said, carne frita, which is pork. They do it with seafood. They do it with a skirt steak.
With shrimp, whatever you want.
It's like a super rich fried plantain with garlic kind of thing. It's delicious. But
But it's green plantains. It's not the sweet. It's the green plantains.
Yeah, it's not the sweet type. I can see it working with a number of things. Actually, like I'm thinking this is going to be really good with it because I say the carne frita, and you probably cook the carne frita until it's like the color of mahogany and like the caramel,
right?
Character really comes, and like something like that, or a brown ale that has like some good bitterness to it would be absolutely delicious. If you said it was you would have put a lot of chilies in it, then I might move in more of an IPA direction, but I would go with something that's got some nice caramelization and some good fruit. So I'd say, brown ale to porter.
Nice.
Have you ever had a beer that tasted better with some kind of food? Like the pairing elevated the flavors for everything, or like you prefer to have that beer with the food than without?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of the, not that I don't like them, there are a lot of them that I do like, and I have, in my refrigerator now, I have beer from Treehouse, I have beer from Other Half, but the modern kind of juicy, hazy IPA, my feeling is like, okay, I drink a couple of those, like in a bar, I might be thinking about something else afterwards because, there's a lot going on, and some of them are a bit sweet. But when you get them together with like really aggressively spicy food, like I was talking about Sichuan Chinese or some Thai dishes, etc., where you have serious heat. Also, some Indian cuisine like vindaloo's. Those beers are great because they have like this, that bit of fruity sweetness is just nice to have as a counterpoint to the really serious heat. And before those beers came along, we didn't really have something that had that character. So whereas I might look at a beer like that and say that's a bit too sweet for me, especially if they add lactose to it, I'm like, I can drink one of those, but it's a little sugary. But then you get it together with food like that, and it's like boom. It's great. It's exactly what you want.
Nice. We have another video for a friend of us, also from Chile. So, señor director, ponga el video.
Hi Garrett, I'm Tomás. I'm a certified Cicerone from Chile, and my question to you is on the subject on food, specifically cooking. How cooking and actively participating as a chef changed the way you view and designed a beer recipe? Thank you so much for your answer, and thank you so much to all the crew of Breaking News Beer and Coffee for the invitation. I hope you all have a really wonderful day.
Gracias, Tomás. Thank you, Tomás. Un abrazo.
Tomás.
Oh, thank you, Tomás, for the question. I would certainly say this: I am a cook. I think I'm a good cook. I am not a chef, which is really important, because I think chef is, as I was saying, it's a profession, it's a job, etc. And I cook for fun, which is really different than cooking as a job. Now, I do sometimes cook in front of audiences. I've done it many, many, many times. While talking about the pairings, me and some of the brewers will cook like 5 courses for people, everything made from scratch in front of a crowd. But still, it's not the same as running a kitchen. So if I will say this, like there's nobody in the world that I'm scared to cook for. I don't care if you run a 3 Michelin star restaurant, you come to my house, I'm going to throw down really hard. But that is not the same as going into a restaurant and then the tickets start coming in from the customers and it's like, okay, cook this, and get it out the door, onto the table, hot and perfect every time. I have no idea how to do that. But what I would say from a mental skills point of view, a thought point of view, I think that the modern brewer, especially in craft brewing where we are being creative, is a culinary mind. The same things that I'm looking for, in beers: balance, structure, and elegance. I'm also looking for, in cooking, you're balancing, acid, salt, fat, sugar, etc., and trying to have a dish that comes across balanced, structured, elegant. You don't want the dish to become tiring halfway through it. So when people are eating it, some things are very rich and they're delicious, but maybe twice as much is not good, right? However much of that food is on the plate, you want people to still want a little bit more when it's gone, not be worn out. And so, I think that the culinary mind really is something which is important to brewers. And I think that people who have a background in cooking tend to make great brewers.
So, talking about another subject, can you talk about the Michael James Jackson Foundation? What it's about? Can you explain it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we went through this, last summer, after the murder of George Floyd and so many other things going on, and of course we were also in lockdown here in New York during the pandemic. I was thinking, how can I make a difference for people of color in this industry, because it's only recently we've started to see some people of various backgrounds really show up in this industry. In many cases, I'll be someplace with hundreds of people, thousands of people, and might be the only African American in the room. This is changing, but it's changing very, very, very slowly. And less than 1% of people who work in brew houses in the United States are black. It's a similar number, maybe slightly higher, for Latinos. Maybe slightly higher than that, for Asians, and lower for Indigenous Americans. I mean, the representation for non-white people, if you like, is very low. And so I started thinking about, well, what is a thing that we could do that would change things? So if you look at a brewery like Brooklyn Brewery, I had to ask myself some hard questions. I have not had a single African-American applicant for a brewing job at Brooklyn Brewery or my previous brewery in more than 30 years.
Wow.
And the question is why? Okay. I have sent Africans to brewing school. I have sent Iraqis to brewing school. I've sent other people to brewing school. It's not that we didn't have diversity, but I never had anybody come looking for a brewing job. So if you want to do, it turns out that if you want to make a change, you have to look in the mirror first. So I had to ask myself some questions. The first question is, might this somehow be my fault? That's a very difficult question to ask yourself, because everybody in this environment, they don't want it to be their fault. It has to be somebody else's fault, right? It's not me.
Yeah.
It's maybe they don't want the job. They didn't hear about the job. It's not my job to tell. All I want is people who can do the job. That's not my problem, et cetera, et cetera. So if you came to Brooklyn Brewery, we required one of two things. Either you have to have experience, or you have to have professional training, right? It's not a restaurant. If you make a mistake, you're not going to burn a piece of fish on Friday night. You're going to kill somebody, or you're going to ruin a $50,000 tank worth of beer. This is not a joke, We are not hobbyists. This is like a serious thing. So I cannot have people around who don't know what they're doing. All right. So I required these two things. Okay, let's break it down. Fewer than 1% of people in brew house are, African American, et cetera, et cetera. So if I require 2 to 3 years of experience, how many people are even possibly am I pulling from? How many are there even in the entire United States from whom I might be choosing? Will they move to New York, etc.? So you get down to this tiny number of people who are left, right? Okay, well, if you take these courses that are very good courses and you learn, brewing, so I don't have to show you everything, and you understand what you're doing, we'll accept that. But then there's this. The courses, a lot of the best courses, $3,000, $4,000, $10,000, $16,000, $20,000. You go to UC Davis and you take a Master Brewer's course. You go to American Brewers Guild, great course, but it costs $10,000. Now, take the fact that African Americans in the United States have 10% of the family assets of European Americans. 10%. This is not their income. This is how much money you can actually put your hands on, the assets of your family. We have nothing. 10%. And so when you say $10,000, you're talking about a person going into debt from which they often can never recover, right? You were not allowed to, your parents were not allowed to buy a house in a neighborhood where the prices would go up. Your parents and grandparents didn't pass anything down to you because it was all taken from them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have the results of past racism that play into the current world and provide a situation where nobody has 2 to 3 years of experience, and they also don't have the money to take the course, which means they can't apply for a job with me, an African American. How do we change this? Well, there are many ways of changing it, and there are many great organizations that are doing the work. The part that we are doing is we are providing scholarships for technical education for people of color in brewing and distilling. And it is brewing and distilling because of Michael James Jackson, who was simultaneously the top beer writer in the world and the top whiskey writer in the world at the same time. 14 million books.
Wow.
In 20 plus languages. And he himself was actively anti-racist. That is Michael. And it was partly because of him that I got to become, the brewer that I am today, the well-known brewer that I am today, because, he went out there and championed me. And in many cases, people would look at me and they see like this black guy from Queens, New York, and say, what the hell is he doing here? He doesn't belong here. And Michael would just step in and say, no, he's the guy you need to talk to. He's the guy that knows what he's doing very well, and you're in good hands with Garrett. And he didn't have to do that. He took active, measures to see that happen. And it's a thing that I definitely appreciate. And people who haven't read his books are really missing out. I mean, yes, they are older books, but if you really want to understand the heart, of beer, you have to read Michael. There'll never be anybody better than him.
He changed the business. He changed the industry. He changed it because of the styles of the.
Yeah, the whole thing about beer style and everything else, the structure, the way that we run competitions all around the world, it all comes from him. So anyway, it's an honor for us to name the foundation after him, and I think that we haven't announced it yet, but we've already chosen our first slate of scholarship awardees. They've already been notified, and I'm just putting together stuff for announcements on social. But it's after all this work over the last year, it's going to be great to see these people going and taking their courses, and also what they're going to go out and do in the world.
Excellent job. Excellent.
That's I don't think we can thank you enough for your time, for your knowledge, for your contributions to the industry. It's been an honor having you here. before we go, if you want to mention anything else, anything new you're up to, what's your next move? What's your next plan?
Oh, there's all kinds of stuff going on.
Yours.
New beers coming along. I mean, speaking of Russian River, we have a project where Vinny started some work in his cool ship. So you understand, like he starts a spontaneous fermentation, 30 U.S. barrels, and so he took that wort and we sent it in a refrigerated container to New York.
Wow.
So it's just slightly fermenting with the natural microflora of that part of California. We then took it, we brewed our own wort, like about 8 times as much. We blended the two together and put it in oak barrels and then fermented it in the barrel so that all of the microflora, all the fermentation is actually from California. Like we didn't add any yeast.
Wow.
All the yeast is wild yeast from California, but most of the actual wort brewed in New York. And so that beer, which we have yet to put into bottles, but we will do it soon, will be called Refraction, which is like, when light comes through a prism and splits into colors.
Yeah.
And I think in the same way, you have this wort coming from California and then splits into all these barrels and colors and flavors in New York. So
Wow.
as the brewery that invented collaborations, and Brooklyn Brewery did invent the idea of the modern collaboration, I have strong ideas about what a collaboration is. And to me, like, this is something that Vinny and I have been talking about doing for like 10 years. And to actually have it come to fruition now is very exciting for us. So I hope, obviously, it all still works out. The beer tastes great. Hopefully it will continue to taste great, but that's exciting. And, as hopefully over time, we all start to get vaccinated, et cetera, start traveling again, and you can start traveling again. I hope that I will be coming to Puerto Rico and that
Yeah.
you will be taking to the best place to get mofongo.
Yes, we will take you.
Definitely.
I gotta have some.
Definitely.
Taking
Bring
a
some
trip
beers.
around the island with you, eating and preparing food, that'd be like a
Wow,
dream come true.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Man.
We can film it.
And Rick Suarez will be with us.
Yeah,
All right,
of course.
awesome.
Yeah.
So
Thank you so much, Garrett. It's
Well,
been a
hey,
pleasure.
Thank
you for your
It's
time.
been an honor, yeah. Thank
So-
you.
Fantastic.
Garrett, if you can say the social media so people can follow you in Instagram, Facebook.
Yeah, I Garrett Oliver. These days I'm better on Instagram than I am on Facebook. I have to catch up. I was saying this today. I need to catch up with my Facebook world, but I'm on Instagram a lot. So I Garrett Oliver, and then just Garrett Oliver on Twitter.
Nice. Arturo, cuéntame, ¿dónde te pueden conseguir?
Facebook, Arturo Ferrer, y Instagram, Minimalist, con X y T al final.
Nítido. Kike, ¿dónde te pueden conseguir? Cuéntame.
Enrique Fernández, Facebook y La Esquinita, Jardín Cervecero. Lo que necesiten de beers, estamos allí a las órdenes. Bayamón.
You got El
Gracias.
Cervecero? Like that? This is your handle? Yeah. How did you get that? What did you, like, sign up when you were 12 or something?
La Esquinita. So we have a craft beer business here in Puerto Rico, and it's called La Esquinita Jardín Cervecero. So
Yeah.
that's the everybody
It's a beer
calls
garden,
it beer
yeah.
garden, but
Yeah, beer garden,
why not
yeah.
call it Jardín Cervecero if
Yeah.
Nice.
we're in Puerto Rico? So awesome.
Jole,
Thank you.
jole.
Thanks again, Garrett.
A mí, primero que nada quiero darle las gracias a Rick, a Nico, a Tomacho por las
A
preguntas.
Tomacho.
Gracias por ser parte del show.
Sí,
Y como
muchas gracias.
decían los muchachos de Wensworth, lo voy a decir en español. El invitado de hoy no lo merecemos. No lo merecemos. We're not worthy, Garrett. We're not worthy. A mí me pueden conseguir en Facebook bajo Jorge Ramos Lugo, en Instagram bajo Ramones Brew. Y a los 4, ay, gracias al señor director, gracias Ariel, gracias Ariel,
Sí,
como
Ariel.
siempre te votaste, gracias, sin ti esto no podría. El próximo live es el próximo 23, marzo 23, mañana martes, vamos a tener a Julia Hertz para que no se lo pierdan. El de hoy fue a las 7 y el de mañana es a las 8 de la noche. Julia Hertz, una educadora de cerveza, advocate, y por ahí para abajo vamos a estar dialogando con ella también mañana. O sea que pendiente, no se lo esperamos mañana también y será hasta la próxima.
Que
Thank
no se
you,
vaya.
Garrett. Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you.
Será hasta la próxima y que no se vaya a decirle
Quique,
My
Quique.
friend.
Stick around for a couple seconds after we shut it down so we can take a screenshot, Garrett.
All right.
Awesome.
Strength
Thank you.
and honor, my friends. Hang in there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Salud.
Salud.
Y peseta.
Salud.
Y gracias a todos que nos vieron. Y gracias a Garrett.
Definitely.
Muchas gracias.
Awesome beers.
Salud y peseta.
Salud,
Llévatelo,
gente.
señor
Buenas
director.
noches.